What is it like to come face to face with evil? To confront your worst nightmare? When a killer comes calling, there's often no escape.
A man who can kill is evil beyond belief.
To truly encounter evil is a rarity most will never experience.
I believe in evil, and I have experienced people that are evil.
But for those unfortunate few who do and survive to tell the tale, the mental scars often never heal.
I couldn't breathe. My eyes felt bulging. All I could see was his face on my face, and he was just staring into my eyes.
We meet the men and women whose lives have been forever altered by their brush with the beasts who live among us. This is Encounters with Evil. Becoming a doctor or nurse is a labor of love. It takes years of dedication, training, and hard work. When we see a doctor, we know that we're putting ourselves in safe hands. We entrust our lives and the lives of our loved ones to these men and women. But sometimes, even those we trust let us down.
The most important things for a criminal are access and opportunity. And if you are in the medical profession, you've got both of those things on a daily basis.
On tonight's program, from a small town in northern England to the murderous Nazi regime of the concentration camps, medics who've utterly failed in their duty of care. Mengele, Shipman, and a young English nurse who snuffed out lives before they'd barely begun, Beverly Allitt. These are killers who have no respect for the Hippocratic Oath.
The Hippocratic Oath is something that doctors take, and it's really the core of their value system.
You will do everything within your power to aid a patient. You should never, ever do anything that could harm a patient.
Doctors with access to patients can carry out crimes unnoticed, precisely because of the trust we place in them. But it's not only doctors who sometimes kill or abuse in contradiction of the Hippocratic Oath. There are other medical professionals with just as much access to the vulnerable. Those angels of mercy, nurses. Beverly Allitt, a nurse whose mission to kill the youngest and most helpless patients in her care left a nation horrified.
With all eyes anxious for a glimpse of Britain's worst female serial killer, Beverly Allitt was driven from court.
A young, barely qualified nurse who poisoned, smothered, and asphyxiated her tiny victims. This is Grantham, a quiet English town and a most unlikely setting for mass murder.
23-year-old Beverly Gail Allitt of Grantham is charged with the murder of 4 children. She faces a further 8 charges of causing grievous bodily harm with intent.
Liam Taylor was just 7 weeks old when he was admitted to Ward 4 at Grantham and Kestephens Hospital for a chest infection.
You would expect him to recover slowly but steadily.
Surprisingly, Liam suffered 2 major heart attacks.
You just hope and pray that everything's going to be okay. So at that point, we thought it was the best place for him to be.
I had to go and tell them that Liam is very, very seriously ill.
He didn't think he would survive, so we took the decision to stay with him. We were both there. We were both there when he died.
Beverly Allitt was born on the 4th of October 1968 and grew up in the village of Corby Glen, not far from Grantham. From her teenage years on in school, Allitt craved attention.
She would dress herself with bandages and plasters that over no wound whatsoever. And if she did have a wound, she would make the most of it. She would pick at it. She would actually make it worse.
So she'd learned, obviously at a young age, that being sick causes other people to care for you and to give you attention. Now that smacks of a girl who isn't getting her emotional needs met.
She said she was pregnant, that she had a stomach ulcer, a brain tumour. Over and over again, doctors treated her and then discovered she was conning them.
She was showing definite signs of Munchausen syndrome.
I don't know if Munchausen's is in fact a real disorder. I wonder whether we just apply this label to what is essentially bad behaviour.
Whether it was just bad behaviour or mental disorder, Allitt had a tendency to violence, and not just against herself. Her ex-fiancé suffered more than once at her hands.
We used to have an argument and she turned around and kicked me in the balls, and I was coming back from Grantham in an old banged out Ford Escort. She just passed a test first time and she started on about that, saying you're a useless driver, and I just told her to shut up, and she turned around me and banged me in the eye, 60 miles an hour.
She was also an individual who self-harmed while she was an adolescent and a trainee nurse, and while she was a qualified nurse, she was cutting.
She had over 100 days absence in her training, so that made her very suspect, to say the least.
One of Allitt's former colleagues revealed at the time the pressure staff faced due to nursing shortages at the hospital. This led to Allitt's recruitment.
Obviously, Bev Allitt was at every crisis. She witnessed it, and she would take over the care of that child because there weren't enough paediatric nurses. We used to think that she was quite capable. She appeared confident, but she obviously wasn't competent.
She didn't have glowing reports from when she was a student, but, you know, if you're understaffed, then you probably low standards.
Only 3 days after Liam Taylor died, Timothy Hardwick also succumbed to a massive heart attack.
I was called by Bev to go to Timothy. Come quick, he's not breathing. I sent for the crash team.
Collapsing Ward 4.
It was to no avail. Nothing we did worked.
She moves from drawing attention to herself by being ill herself to actually inducing illness in a child in order to gain attention as being the caring angel that is looking after that child.
If you want to do any harm to a patient, you do it at night time because they're sleeping, the whole ward's quiet. You can do things without anybody noticing.
She would be the first member of staff to notice this child seemed to be overdosing on saline or some other intervention, obviously because she'd done it herself.
But the senior nurses on Ward 4 were getting concerned.
There were more incidents in the space of 6 or 7 weeks than in the previous 10 years that I'd known.
I think a lot of us just thought it was just bad luck. We were just frightened.
And yet doctors and hospital administrators didn't suspect that there was a killer in their midst, even though the resuscitation crash team was called to Ward 4 17 times over the next 8 weeks. Allitt injected another victim, 5-month-old Paul Crampton, 3 times with high doses of insulin. His blood sugar sank so low that he went into a coma. The doctors decided to test Paul's blood. They took a sample and sent it off for testing, marking it urgent. A combination of delays meant it was a full 15 days before Paul's test was done. While the hospital administrators waited, more children were attacked.
The babies would have been experiencing severe trauma. Having, loaded amounts of potassium or insulin injection will actually produce quite traumatic reactions from the body.
She was there as a kind of almost angel coming in and solving the problem of what was happening to the child.
In what was perhaps her most callous crime, Allitt attacked twin baby girls, Becky and Katie Phillips. Becky was admitted to Ward 4 after having trouble feeding. She was treated and sent home, but in the middle of the night went into a coma. Becky was the third child to die. The hospital said it was a cot death. In fact, she'd been injected with insulin.
Beverly Allitt was prepared to watch children die, and she was prepared to see families' lives crumble in grief. And she did that because they were just a means to her to gain the attention that she needed.
Becky's twin sister, Katie, arrived on Ward 4 simply for observation. Allitt not only poisoned her, but broke 4 of her ribs.
Allitt breaking a baby's ribs is just indicative of the fact that for her, these victims were just objects.
She enjoyed it, and nobody suspected her, and she got a lot of pleasure from that. And we know that when something is pleasurable and the rewards are quick and there is no negative side to that, it makes it more likely that we'll do that behaviour over and over again.
Having murdered one twin sister, Allitt put herself forward as the saviour of the other.
The mother was so impressed by her care that she actually made her godmother for the other twin. And she ended up damaging that twin, not killing them, unfortunately, but doing a lot of damage to that child.
While the deaths were taking place, doctors finally received the blood tests on Paul Crampton, which provided hard evidence. He had been injected with insulin. It looked like there was a killer on the loose. Yet they didn't call the police or close the ward. Doctors went to the hospital managers with their fears. They asked for video cameras to be installed on the ward, but they were refused. With the death of the 4th baby, Claire Peck, finally, the police were called in.
I felt that there was something here that was worthy of investigation.
When the police took a look at the suspicious activities, it became clear that only one nurse was on duty for each of the 26 emergencies. Beverly Allitt.
Last night, 23-year-old Beverly Gail Allitt of Grantham, a former nurse at the Grantham and Kesteven Hospital, was charged with 4 counts of murder, 8 counts of attempted murder, and 8 counts of causing grievous bodily harm.
During the course of all of the interviews, she maintained her innocence. She never made any admission at all.
The trial lasted 2 months. The jury found her guilty of 4 murders, 3 attempted murders, and 6 charges of grievous bodily harm.
There were tears in the public gallery as she was led away. "Lock her in a cage," shouted one woman.
Allitt was given a total of 13 life terms. But rather than being sent to prison, Allitt was sent to Rampton, a high-security hospital, as a patient, not a prisoner.
Do you understand what happened? Why are you here?
No, not really.
Why? Why not?
Because I haven't really been told. I've just been told that I came here for treatment for personality disorder.
Beverly Allitt, when she was caught, her original diagnosis was that of Munchausen syndrome by proxy.
That's a very controversial diagnosis, and it's given to people who exaggerate, fabricate, or cause physical harm to another person to gain positive attention. And the people gain that by orchestrating a situation, and usually a very dramatic situation, where they can rush in and they can either save the day or they can be viewed as a tragic hero or a martyr. A lot of women were wrongly accused of having Munchausen's by proxy, and there were investigations into cot deaths which resulted in women being imprisoned, and in actual fact the medical evidence to say that they were responsible for those deaths was not there. So I think that had Beverly Allitt been tried at a different time, when Munchausen's had fallen out of favour and wasn't so fashionable, there probably would have been a different outcome for her.
Today, Allitt is still living as a patient at Rampton Secure Hospital, rather than in prison.
We're out, got more freedom in it.
You like it better than where you were before?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I've got more freedom. I'm not locked up all the time.
For many, she has literally got away with murder.
And still to this day, I still can't get my head round what she did.
Allitt was pretty much evil. and showed absolutely no compassion whatsoever. In fact, used children to glorify herself. That's pretty evil.
Beverly Allitt is one of Britain's worst female serial killers. But there are doctors who lay no claim to mental illness, who've murdered many more than her. In 1979, while swimming in the warm waters off Brazil, an elderly man named Wolfgang Gerhardt suffered a stroke and drowned. In 1985, that body was exhumed. It proved to be the body of one of the most infamous killer doctors of all time, Joseph Mengele.
Mengele is one of those people who could always use that defense of, I was only following orders.
As a student, Mengele focused on the genetics of deformity, qualifying to practice medicine in 1938, just as the Nazis were in the ascendant. Doctors took their lead from party edicts.
In this version of the Hippocratic Oath, the SS doctor was to work for the racial community, was to work for the Nordic race, and those outside the racial community, that means the Jews, the Sinti and Roma, or the Gypsies, they had no rights, they had no entitlement to protection.
Within 5 years, Mengele's career took him to work at a place whose very name conjures up images of man's inhumanity to man. Auschwitz.
Auschwitz is regarded as an appropriate location for him to work as a doctor, and what's important was the person carrying out the choice, so of who was fit to work and who should be killed.
Train, when I arrived on the 2nd September 43, we were 1,451 persons. 66% have been gassed the very day of their arrival.
He would rapidly, with a flick of the wrists, direct the person left or right, and their fate would be sealed.
When we start to look at the Nazi atrocities, they're beyond description. They defy any kind of psychological explanation, I feel, because they're just so awful.
Mengele perhaps saw himself differently, working with a view of serving science.
He is doing sanitary prevention work within the camp. That means if there is an outbreak of an infectious disease like typhus, he will send the whole block to the gas chamber.
You've got a whole process of brainwashing and being indoctrinated to view your subjects as just that, subjects, less than human, less than animal even, and that allows you to do terrible, terrible things.
Mengele realizes that standing on the ramp amidst these hundreds and thousands of Jews, there are twins, and there are others with genetic anomalies like dwarves. One day they find a whole family of 18 dwarves, the Ovitz family, and he realizes that he has a unique opportunity for pursuing genetic research.
In 1985, while Mengele was still hiding out in Brazil, survivors of his supposed scientific experiments gathered in Jerusalem.
Hundreds of victims of Auschwitz crowded into the mock courtroom as the hearings opened. More than 20 sets of twins have been brought here from all over the world. And today, 40 years on, they were being asked to relive their childhood in Mengele's hospital.
The reason he was interested in twin studies was he wanted to see how Germany could affect multiple births and produce an Aryan race much more quickly.
Some said it was like a farm for animals, where they underwent operations like guinea pigs.
We would have been made pregnant by other twins because he was interested in the genetic results.
They're being marched across the camp to laboratories, tests are being done on them endlessly. Twins are injected, they're infected, Each limb, each part of the body is measured in enormous detail.
Вместили какие-то бараки, где на нас делали эксперименты медицинские. Нам делали уколы сначала в одну сторону груди. Здесь начались такие шишки большие, черно-синие.
Blood is certainly being extracted in very large quantities.
They have injected germs into me. Supposedly, I was supposed to be dead in 2 weeks, except that I refused to die. And would I have died, they would have killed my sister instantly. And then compare the two organs of the body, the one that is well and the one that is ill.
Siblings are going to be killed. The family members are going to be killed. He is killing twins for scientific purposes.
Some of the survivors of this most evil of doctors came forward to give testimony of the atrocities committed in the name of science.
Used to get shots every 2 weeks, and then he and his brother couldn't speak. These shots caused what you just seen. His brother died 1 year after the liberation.
There was one family, 8 of them are killed to obtain the different colored eyes. He sends organs, bones, and blood back to this Berlin Institute of Ottmar von Verschuur, the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology.
At 91 years old, Alina Dabrowska is still consumed by the horror of what happened to her here. For the first time, Alina is shown some of the tools used by Mengele for his cruel experiments, sterilizations, crude transplants, and here, even the typhus she was injected with as a guinea pig to test medicines.
I had hallucination. I got a very high fever.
But was Mengele evil? Or was it the evil environment of the camp that led him to perform such callous medical experiments on the prisoners?
We know that psychopaths have a very limited empathy circuit within their brain.
No compassion, no feelings.
Mengele couldn't have had those areas in his brain working as a usual human being.
He would take them sweets, he would ruffle their hair, he even got them to call him Uncle Mengele. But less than 24 hours later, he could easily sanction their death for scientific purposes in the harvesting of body parts for study.
There's one of the prisoner doctors, Gisela Perl. At one point, he notices Mengele's very stressed. She feels that he's going to start ordering the killing of some twins. So she shows him an interesting fetus and diverts his attention, calms him down.
At nearby Block 10, where many of the experiments took place, she could not bring herself to cross the threshold.
I am very glad that we are here, not going further.
He had a grandiose, narcissistic idea of what he could achieve by doing this.
With the tide of the war turning, Mengele's choices appear on the surface to be pragmatic.
He knows that the camp is going to be evacuated. He knows that the research has to stop. He stops at the beginning of December 1944. He does not order the killing of the dwarves or the killing of the twins wholesale. And that's in contrast to some of the SS doctors. They want the evidence of their human guinea pigs completely destroyed in the hope that nobody will find out about it. Mengele simply keeps those whom he has been researching on for several months, he walks away from them.
There's a lot of research that would be fascinating, but we don't do for ethical reasons. I think he was unethical rather than evil.
It was very obvious that he had no idea of what actually would produce good evidence. He was so far off the beaten track of what science would have wanted.
The only benefit was for the human guinea pigs who survived all this invasive research. They have their lives.
He had no regrets about what he did and didn't feel any shame about what he'd done because it was in the name of the race and science.
I don't think they are normal men. I can't find a proper English word for this. They're bestia, so beast.
Some people study medicine because it will be a stable career. Some choose it because it will be financially rewarding. And some, albeit a small minority, will choose medicine because it gives easy access to vulnerable victims.
In 2013, a British doctor was accused of sexually abusing boys as young as 10 who were suffering from cancer. Miles Bradbury was a highly qualified cancer specialist, a family man, and a regular churchgoer.
Some of the things we know about long-term serious sexual offenders is that they become very good at compartmentalizing their lives.
He was able to create an environment in which everyone thought that what was going on was entirely normal.
No nurse, no doctor, no parent suspected Miles Bradbury of abuse. They trusted him.
Whether do they go into working in gynecology or children that because of their sexual interests, or sexual interest is developed from the work they do, is a difficult one, to say the least. I think certainly people are attracted by their interests.
At this famous hospital, Miles Bradbury carried out what the judge who jailed him described as the worst forms of sexual abuse imaginable.
It's that almost godlike character rescuing children from, cancer, no more awful a disease can you think of.
This woman's son was 11 when he was treated by the cancer specialist.
He was doing examinations on him that he didn't need to be doing. He was touching parts he didn't need to be touching. He was sexually abusing him.
Bradbury used a hidden camera pen to record his sexual abuse.
Evidence off one of the pens, and that was obviously a movie of an examination being carried out by Mr. Bradbury.
What you often find with sex offenders is that they record it and they can relive it and they can enjoy watching it time and time again until it fades and then they pick on another victim.
Police found many of the boys were simply too young to understand that what the doctor was doing was wrong.
The children were just describing what they thought were normal examinations.
Here is somebody who chose to offend against children in a way that was available to him. And sex offenders come in all shapes and sizes, and we find them in all different walks of life.
He's clearly someone who has had a paedophilic interest in children for many years, and he's been able to use his job to facilitate access and abuse.
He was so brazen, he would regularly abuse these boys while their parents were in the same room, just the other side of the curtain.
In addition to child abuse, Bradbury pleaded guilty to possessing over 16,000 indecent images.
Amongst the people that do enact child abusive activity, many of those do use child pornography.
His sick desires overrode any duty of care he had for his patients, who he turned into victims.
Perhaps the cruelest twist, Bradbury didn't tell this woman's son he was all clear, so their contact could continue.
Our son didn't have the blood disorder. He was seeing him just literally to abuse him on a regular basis.
Questions were asked about how Bradbury managed to get away with his crimes for over 4.5 years.
Bradbury deliberately and intelligently manipulated the trust of patients, manipulated formal processes, and manipulated committed staff going the extra mile for patients.
This was Miles Bradbury the day he admitted abusing his patients.
I'm so sorry.
Being a paedophile doesn't necessarily mean that you are psychiatrically ill. People say, well, they've got to be sick, but actually in legal terms, they're not. And whether you become a paedophile, i.e. act upon your impulses, is a matter of choice.
Dr. Miles Bradbury was found guilty of abusing 18 boys and jailed for 22 years.
Some children have sadly passed away because of their conditions, and for them, justice was not witnessed today.
Bradbury abused his patients horrendously. But 15 years before, one doctor forever changed the landscape of British medicine. Harold Shipman.
Dr. Harold Shipman was brought to court from Strangeways Prison, where he's being held on remand, to hear a QC describe him to the jury as a man who found the drama of taking life to be to his taste.
Shipman was the ultimate betrayer of trust, a killer who hid in plain sight as a local doctor.
So here is somebody who isn't carving up dead bodies in a basement somewhere. He's a doctor, and he's a friendly-looking, middle-class doctor.
We'd had Dr. Shipman for over 20 years. My gran worshipped him.
He got this impression from home that he was something special.
And the person who made him believe he was something special was his mother.
We know that Shipman was adored by his mother. He was a favourite of his mother.
She sent him off to school at 8 in a bow tie. How many children go from a council estate, go to school in a tie, let alone a bow tie?
When his mother was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, the adolescent Shipman looked after her, right up until the day she died.
He was 17 and she was literally on her dying bed. The doctor administered probably a higher dose of morphine, as often is the case in these circumstances, which would have allowed his mother to drift off relatively painlessly and never particularly wake up again.
On the night his beloved mother dies, 17-year-old Harold Shipman reacts by going on a grueling nighttime run through the rain.
He went out that night and he ran all night. His brain will have been inundated with very high levels of endorphins, which are 1,000 times more powerful than morphine, and will have given him a massive sense of reward. And it was probably one of the templates that set his killing career into operation.
I just don't go for the morphine and the mum and everything else. I think it's convenient. People like to use that as a convenient excuse.
It may have influenced him more strongly into going into study medicine when he was older, but I don't think it was influential in his decision to offend.
Of course it must have affected him when he saw her go through cancer and when he saw her ultimately die of that. And he saw the GP come round and he saw his mother gain some relief from injections of morphine. But it's a huge leap to say that this caused him to go out and kill his patients.
By 1974, he was a father of 2 and joined a group medical practice in Todmorden, Yorkshire. And it's here there is the first inkling that all is not right with Shipman.
Shipman secretly rewrote patients' records. He prescribed drugs for them, which he never administered to them. He used the drugs himself. He was hooked on pethidine and deceived his patients and partners to get it.
You get huge mood swings with pethidine because you initially get a euphoric hit and you need more and more of it to get the same effect. But then you get a real downer with that because actually the effects are very, very short term. He wanted to soothe his psyche. He was a troubled soul.
In 1975, he was reported to the General Medical Council in London. And what did they do? They refused to strike him off. They said he wasn't a risk to patients.
If we struck off every doctor that had a problem with prescribed drugs, we'd actually lose a lot of doctors.
By 1979, Shipman moved to Hyde in the Greater Manchester area. He originally joined the Donnybrook Medical Centre as a GP and then set up as a sole practitioner.
He was very popular. A lot of the old dears in Hyde loved him because he seemed to have time and energy to talk to them rather than just next. And they loved him for that.
He clearly was a very talented family physician and he wanted to be dealing with medical issues. There's some suggestion that he found his patients to be tiresome and they were becoming a waste of his time and his talent, which is one of the motivations why he may have experimented with killing them.
Little did his adoring elderly clientele know that an appointment with their doctor was also a potential encounter with their executioner.
81-year-old widow and former mayoress of Hyde, Kathleen Grundy, died at the end of June. Her body was found inside her 17th century cottage on the outskirts of Manchester.
Mrs. Grundy's daughter became suspicious when she discovered her mother's £386,000 estate had been left to Dr. Shipman. But the GP said he had no idea the new will would leave the house to him. When he'd been asked to sign a piece of paper, he didn't know what it contained.
Utter stupidity is how I would describe how he got caught. He faked a will. It was badly typed, badly worded. While a lot of old people will leave money for the GP, a few £100, a few £1,000, he was greedy and said, I want the lot. It was quite obvious the will was faked.
Shipman was arrested on the 7th of September 1998 and charged with the murder of Kathleen Grundy.
I'm giving you the cause of death. Fatal overdose of morphine or diamorphine. They've asked you to comment about that.
And I have commented. I've said that I had my suspicions that she was actually abusing a narcotic of some sort, or at least taking a narcotic of some sort.
89-year-old woman who's former mayor of Hyde, highly respectable person, and he tried to say that she was a drug addict.
I suggest to you that you have injected Mrs. Grundy with a fatal overdose of morphine that brought about her death.
No. He was very arrogant in his interviews. He didn't think a detective was high enough status, a man of his ability.
Shipman never admitted guilt. He said he wasn't responsible for any of the crimes, and of course he wouldn't take part in the interviews, quite infamously refusing to give any comment in all the hundreds of hours that he was interviewed by detectives.
But police had their suspicions that Mrs. Grundy wasn't Shipman's only victim.
Greater Manchester Police say he was only arrested in connection with the death of Mrs. Grundy. But this morning they've issued a statement saying, as a result of these charges, police will be making further inquiries into a number of other deaths.
Dr. Shipman gave Ivy Lomas a lethal overdose of morphine, and then as she lay dead in his treatment room, he went on to see 3 other patients. Only then did he raise the alarm.
I think that he chose his victims not because they reminded him of his mother. His mother, in actual fact, was a year older than me when she died, and I don't consider myself an elderly woman. He chose his victims because they were convenient, and it meant that he could get away with it.
In December 1997, a relative of Kathleen Wagstaff delivered a Christmas present to Dr. Shipman's surgery, a bottle of gin. That was in the morning. In the afternoon, Dr. Shipman paid the 81-year-old Mrs. Wagstaff a visit, and there sat the Crown. He killed her.
He felt probably quite comfortable going into their homes in a one-to-one situation with no one watching his back, as there would be in a surgery.
After a tearful 20-minute court appearance, Dr. Harold Shipman was driven back to prison where he's on remand. Tonight, the 52-year-old general practitioner stands accused of killing 4 of his patients.
Even though he was now accused of killing 4 women, the police were sure there were more innocent elderly victims and set about a grisly task.
Lumbering reluctantly out of the darkness, a mechanical digger weaves between the headstones and the flowers to begin yet another search in a puzzle that is fast becoming Britain's most sensitive and difficult murder investigation.
As exhumations took place, the number of Shipman's victims rose steadily. Each one found with the same lethal overdose of morphine.
The way they were and where they were found, or where we saw them when we got there, and the way that people have found other people that's come out in the trial, they were in the same position. My mother was laid down on the settee, my father was just sat in the chair.
Harold Frederick Shipman was found guilty of killing 15 of his patients, making this apparently unremarkable 54-year-old GP the country's most prolific serial killer for at least 100 years. The judge said that the sheer wickedness of Shipman's crimes was shocking beyond belief.
A GP who'd murdered not 1, not 2, but at least 15 of his patients.
For such heinous crimes, life must mean life.
Sadly, nothing that's happened here, nor can happen in the future, can bring about my mum and all the other victims. We hope we can now have the space and the time to remember my mum as she was, a happy, active, caring, energetic, loving person whom we miss so much.
And now many more relatives came forward with accusations.
The Crown Prosecution Service has been considering files sent to us by the police on a number of further allegations of murder against Harold Shipman.
Good morning, Victim Support. Can I help you?
Did he kill my mother? The question every caller wanted to know today of Victim Support's local councillors. Alice Kitchen's family believes she was killed by Shipman. They now want him pursued in court.
We're hoping that charges will follow, because we're absolutely convinced now that Shipman killed my mother.
It was people like these that Shipman chose to end their lives. And with a few moments of silence, they remember their two friends today and all the others, those they know about and those to come.
In July 2002, a full report into Shipman's killing activities was published.
Dame Janet Smith's first report from the Shipman inquiry has reached a shocking conclusion. The crimes of Dr. Harold Shipman are unparalleled in history.
How many patients can I kill before I'm found out? How can I prove I am cleverer than the society which thinks it caught me out?
The figure of 215 killings may not represent the true total.
And we don't know exactly how many people he killed.
He enjoyed that sense of control over that person, ultimate control, godlike control. His main purpose, if you like, in life was a kind of love of delivery of death, which is pretty close to being a necrophile.
You would never ever imagine that your doctor was going to be Britain's worst serial killer. It was very difficult. We thought he was looking after us on a personal level on that day.
If I could have 5 minutes alone with him, as most families, they would just like to know why.
I would say to him, why did you have the right to take my father's life? What gave you that right?
I think he had a God complex, if you like. I think that it met his narcissistic need.
He was delivering mercy and pain relief to the elderly, although he knew perfectly well that he was administering it many, many years too soon.
And then Shipman took his own life. Too soon. Especially for those who wanted justice and some understanding of why 215 of his patients ended up in the cemetery.
A final act of defiance. Harold Shipman, the man who craved control above all else, took his own decision about when his life sentence would end.
Dr. Shipman's body was found by 2 officers this morning at 6:20. He'd hidden himself behind a curtain and used a noose made from his bedsheets. The relatives of his victims want to know why he wasn't on suicide watch and why he was allowed to take his own life.
To have, I suppose in his words, a mere prison officer telling him what to do, he found that very difficult.
The detective who caught him believed there was always a chance he would one day acknowledge his guilt.
There are killers who are in prison who took 10 or 15 years to confess their parts in serial killings, and I think there was always the potential there for Harold Shipman to do that.
We have to speculate at what Shipman's motives were because, of course, we're never going to know and he's not here to tell us.
Shipman had a fundamental evil nature because he enjoyed this process of killing elderly individuals.
No, Shipman wasn't evil. Clearly, he was a very well-respected, valued GP. Unfortunately, he also had a sideline where he was killing his patients.
Most serial murderers and most serious repeat sexual offenders are very banal, boring, uninteresting individuals. It's what we see as the banality of evil. And that's why they're able to get close to their victims and offend in the way that they do.
But if somebody wants to kill, hospitals are a good place to kill as any. But it's very rare. You're going to die of lung cancer. You're going to die of heart attacks. You're going to die being in a road accident. Very rarely are you going to get killed by a serial killer.